Now I would love to present our guest from UK, Peter Cunnane, Director of International and National Initiatives at Innovate Finance. Peter assumes that the next big things in the fintech sector are central banking digital currencies, what we just heard, right? ROCKIT and greater links between individual and business security in the digital world. By the way, it's not the first time that Peter is in Lithuania, and besides that he's a fan of Lithuanian fintech sector, he's also a fan of Lithuanian beer. So if you would like to invite Peter for a chat or talk, you know where to bring him. So Peter, welcome on the stage. Lovely to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for that warm introduction. And yes, if anybody does want to buy me a pint afterwards, I'll be available for questions. It's an absolute pleasure to be back here in Vilnius in Lithuania today, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here in person as well, having sat at home watching events like this for the last 2 and a bit years. And for those of you that are at home or elsewhere, thank you and welcome, and thank you, of course, to ROCKIT for the kind invitation, and for all my colleagues over at the Department of International Trade, FCDO, in Vilnius as well, for their support. I am Peter Cunnane. I am the Director of International and National Initiatives at Innovate Finance. I'll explain all of that in a moment. But for those of you that don't know us or are not aware of us, Innovate Finance is the UK's preeminent trade organisation supporting the fintech sector, the global fintech sector, based in London and around the UK. We also have a number of members overseas as well. And I'm here today primarily to talk about the strength of the UK fintech sector as a global ecosystem, to talk about how that fits together and how we've learned, or what I should say is what we've learned in terms of how we can, pass on best learnings to other hubs around the world, but also connect and learn from those other hubs around the globe as well. And it's no accident that I'm here in Lithuania as the first place to visit on the continent in 2 years. What's happening here in the Lithuanian fintech ecosystem is really exciting, and there's much for us in the UK to connect with and to learn from those businesses that are innovating here, and those that are looking to seek and to scale elsewhere as well. So, as I say, really pleased to be here. I do have some slides, which I shall run through, but what I want to sort of focus on first is the UK's position, I should say the Innovate Finance position in the global ecosystem for fintech. We work with many organisations and key stakeholders, both in the UK to support the continued growth of the sector, but also around the globe as well. And there are a number of partnerships, bridges, connections through other organisations. The GFIN network was mentioned by one of the speakers earlier, that we either engage with directly or are keen to support. And these reach right around the world and place the UK fintech ecosystem and Innovate Finance right at the heart of that global ecosystem. Back home in the UK, we work very closely with the UK government, of course, with the Prime Minister's office, with HM Treasury, our finance ministry, particularly on the strategic direction of UK fintech. Last year, we saw the launch of something called the Khalifa Review of UK fintech, which was a huge undertaking for which we were co-secretariat, looking at the roadmap for the future of UK fintech, looking specifically on how far we'd come over the last 5 or 10 years, but also looking at the next 10 years and where we needed to go. And I'm delighted to hear that that's been picked up internationally, and I've been in conversation the last 24 hours even here about the direction that could have, or certainly could be replicated in terms of the Lithuanian ecosystem as well. So that's a great learning to take back on that report. As mentioned already, my colleagues over at Department of International Trade, the international promotion of UK fintech, very important for us as well. But we're also very keen to bring the regulators with us and to work with them, primarily the UK's FCA, of course. Much of the fintech activity in the UK is licensed or regulated there, but we also closely work with the Bank of England, our central bank, to ensure the future direction of UK fintech and some of the sort of things I will come to in a moment around certainly future trends, anticipation and adaptation of digital currencies and so on is worked through, and that they're connecting with the industry as well. Other key strands for us in terms of supporting the ecosystem, capital, which I'll talk more about in a moment, very important, and a huge success story for the UK in terms of the levels of investment that are available as well. Skills and talent, of course, why it's important for us to be an inclusive ecosystem, to bring diversity. I should talk more about that in a moment as well. And, of course, the wider community of fintechs, not just the government organizations, agencies, regulators, but also the businesses themselves, our members. Innovate Finance is a membership organization primarily with over 260 members. We are driven very much by our members' needs. Many of our members come from the sort of emerging side of financial technology, startups, those through to scale-ups, through to high-growth businesses, such as Revolut, for example, but also some of the key financial institutions in the city, many of the UK retail banks, professional services and legal services firms as well. It's a very broad community, and I've also listed up there some of the key hubs we work with, such as Level 39 in Canary Wharf in London, and some of the other locations that are similar in terms of supporting businesses around the UK as well. So many places that we work, many places that we interact. While I have this slide up behind me, I'll talk a little bit about some of the fintech bridges that we've forged over the years, either directly as Innovate Finance or on the back of agreements that the UK government has gone into. We announced last year, for example, a strategic partnership with Austrade, the Australian equivalent of our own UK Department for International Trade, seeking to build closer ties with the Asia-Pacific region, encouraging our businesses to look at Australia, for example, as a launch pad to that global region. And we are in discussions, of course, with other key hubs around the globe to do similar things, such as Singapore, and we will be focusing very much on the United States this year as well, with our US program later in the year. So we're keen to sort of build those links, those that are highlighted on the board behind me, but those that are perhaps not as well. And of course, one of the key markets for many of our businesses remains the European Union, the continent of Europe. And it's very important for our members, particularly post-Brexit, to feel that they can still connect into that market. Admittedly, it might be a little bit harder now in terms of the regulatory compliance and some of the hoops that they need to run through, but we're there as an organization to support them in that, and I think it's really important for us to be out and seen around Europe, particularly here in this region and across the Baltic states and the Nordic countries as well, to bring together the like-minded places where UK fintechs can go and engage, and equally where businesses from those areas can look towards the UK as part of their scaling journey as well. So that's a really important message for us this year as well, in terms of not forgetting our nearest and dearest neighbours. In terms of some of the other work that's happening, I'll come back to some of those themes in a moment around what makes the ecosystem and how we continue to connect and thrive. A little bit more about the wider UK, though, for those of you that are interested. We work very closely with a number of other organisations across the United Kingdom that support the development of UK fintech. We co-created something called the Fintech National Network a couple of years ago with partners in Scotland, the north of England, Wales, Northern Ireland, the southwest of England, the Midlands as well, for those of you familiar with the geography of the United Kingdom, the various regions and nations of the UK. And all these like-minded organisations are now pulling together in a way perhaps they never have done before, to work together to ensure that those of you that are looking towards the UK recognize the different strengths and qualities of the United Kingdom and the fintech ecosystem. The strengths of London, of course, I think are obvious to anyone looking at us from overseas, but many exciting innovations happening across the UK in different cities. Lots of sustainable finance and green fintech down in Bristol in the southwest of England. Many exciting things happening around the innovation, the payments and innovation space in our great cities in the north of England, such as Manchester and Leeds, and further north in places like Edinburgh and Glasgow. Wealth tech is very much supported, as is open banking. So just to pull out a few of the cities, there are so many. There are a number of hubs that are emerging across the UK in places also like Belfast and Cardiff, where real things are happening, really special things are happening. So it's great to be able to talk about talk about the UK as a whole and not just focus all the time on London and the southeast of England, where the strengths I think to many of you are obvious. I'm going to come back to that figure at the top in a moment around investment. Let's tackle that now. There are three core strengths, I think, in terms of the UK ecosystem and what constitutes the comparative advantage of the UK ecosystem, which enables us to think internationally. One of the great successes in recent years, despite the pandemic, as you can see behind me, is the level of investment now into UK fintech. It has been phenomenal over the last 2 years, and 2021 surpassed all expectations. $11.6 billion invested into UK fintech and businesses based in the UK, over 200% increase on the previous year. It's an amazing story, and I know it's reflected in other markets around the world as well. Our VC funds, our members in the investment space are really looking now at what innovations they can support and take forward. And it's really fascinating to see that story is really taking a hold and taking shape. A huge number of deals happening across the UK. And also strengths, of course, for those businesses that are growing and looking to list on the London Stock Exchange and elsewhere. So it's not just the startups, the scale-ups, it's those high growth businesses, those businesses that are fast becoming household names in our own domestic market, the likes of Revolut, Starling, Monzo, for example, and many others. In terms of, the pandemic really has transformed how individual consumers manage their finances and see, the importance of connecting with their financial services. And I think using the technology available to do that has really taken shape in the UK, and I think there's much to be commended there. One of the other comparative strengths alongside investment is our regulatory landscape and our support from public policy in building the ecosystem. Innovate Finance itself, as a trade organisation, sprung out of a report commissioned by several prime ministers ago now to look at how the government could better support the system. We are an independent organisation, but we came out of an idea that the UK should have this organisation to support UK fintech, and actually, that support from the public sector has continued, and that support from the regulatory sector has continued as well. Innovate Finance worked very closely with the FCA around the earlier creation of the regulatory sandbox. We worked with them very closely on the development of the notion of industry sandboxes, and when the time came for the GFIN network to be launched, we were very much supportive and alongside our colleagues at the FCA in that. We recognise the importance, particularly when you're talking about international connectivity, of ensuring that you've got that regulatory support as well, particularly if you're moving across borders and across markets. If you want to connect with like-minded hubs, the immediate barriers and challenges you will face as a business are likely to be regulatory ones. And I think so having Innovate Finance there on behalf of our members in the UK has been fundamental in shifting and shaping that. And certainly the regulators have recognised that there's an educational piece for them in terms of different innovations and different ways of doing things. And that's been a very core relationship. Now, I've heard it said, and I've heard it said again today here, that the shift in regulation is changing. It is perhaps becoming a little tougher. And I think there's a good reason for that. I think certainly in the UK, fintech is a maturing market. We can see that from the investment levels behind me. But actually, I think that sign of maturity is that sign of, a more robust regulatory system that wants to ensure that it operates for the broader benefit of society. So I think that's why we're seeing that shift in tone. But actually, I think it's a really good move for the UK and for fintech at large. I think it really demonstrates a depth across the different segments of UK fintech, whether you're in wealth tech, whether you're in SME financing, or whether you're in the buy now, pay later space. I think there's a journey that we're all going along, and seeing the regulators respond positively to that is good. And I mentioned the Bank of England a few moments ago as well. In their role has been fundamental in terms of the sort of future-proofing of the sector and looking towards those developments that are coming that we as a country need to respond to, we as an ecosystem need to respond to. The broader adoption of digital currencies and whether or not there is a need for a central bank digital currency, very much a live topic for debate at the moment in the UK. And we are working alongside the bank to, again, ensure that the right messages are going from business to them, and to ensure that they're hearing what they need to hear in terms of shaping their own views as well. So a comparative advantage in terms of the regulatory space, the public policy space, but also the investment space has been really important to us in terms of building that ecosystem. A key plank of that, as of course, was the Khalifa review. I've put the dashboard up there of the different chapters of the review to give you a sort of a top level of some of the things that Khalifa focused on in terms of the depth of the review. Investment we've already talked about. Skills I'll come back to in a moment. But that international and national connectivity is key in terms of driving things forward. We've seen many of the we've seen a great response from UK government, but we've seen many of the recommendations now come into place as well. A recognition of some of the recommendations around investment and listing carried by both the Khalifa and another review that happened concurrently called the Hill Review on listings coming to the fore, and a recognition that there is more to be done to support businesses as they reach the more mature stage of their journey. Skills and the opportunities for international talent to still come to the UK and with relative ease, and to ensure that that's something that we can do and support as well. The adoption of a scale-up visa, for example, in the last 6 months has been another great achievement for us and on the back of that review. And there is more to come. There is certainly more to come in terms of how we continue on this international journey, around how we continue to connect with those like-minded places around the globe. And certainly there is a lot more to be done in that space as well. I want to come back to skills and talent, because the third great area for UK fintech at the moment, after investment, after regulation, but parallel to it, and something that we at Innovate Finance are keen to support, is that notion of fintech as a force for good and as a force for change as well. Skills is very much a core part of that. The diversity of our community is really important to us. For a number of years, Innovate Finance has run a successful Women in FinTech initiative. We have a power list of significant women that have played a significant role in the development of the sector, which we launch on an annual basis. The next time, I believe, is on March the 17th, next month. And we're very proud of that piece, but we want to broaden it further. We want to ensure that that particularly students and children are looking at finance and technology careers in a positive light, and from whatever gender, background, race, sexuality they come from, that they feel that fintech is a diverse sector and a sector that's for them. Fintech is very much born out of a reaction, I suppose, to the financial services of old. Certainly in the UK, that sort of notion of it being a male-dominated place is something that we see fintech as a positive change for, and that's something that's very important to us, and it's very important in terms of innovation and collective driving of ideas to have as much diversity in the sector as possible. But there are other things that we're noticing that fintech can do, and I think it was Ivo who mentioned earlier, green fintech. Well, fintech has always been green, absolutely, but fintech is a place where we can support new ways of looking at how we support the economy, how we support the planet, how those products and services that we're developing are truly sustainable. Even down to how we as an organization can be sustainable, and support a growing side of the economy. Green finance or green fintech is a very prevalent discussion in the UK at the moment, certainly following on from the successful summit in Glasgow last year, COP26, and a notion that fintech can do its part to help support the economy and help support society. A lot of change has happened over the last 2 years. A lot of people in business, a lot of individual consumers are looking at how they engage with the economy. I'm sure you in this room and also watching have all thought about how the pandemic has affected your lives and has affected how you view how you do business and how you conduct your life. And I think that's something that's really at the forefront of, I know it's something that's really at the forefront of Innovate Finance's thinking at the moment, and how we can support those businesses that really do want to make a positive change. So that's something that we're very keen to talk up alongside, all the great stuff that's been happening around the strategic direction of fintech in the last few years. And in terms of what else we can do, and where I see perhaps fintech going forward, and where I see UK fintech going forward, there are a number of international initiatives at the moment. We've talked about GFin, we've talked about the fintech bridges, we've talked about the connectivity that's so important around the globe for UK fintech. What we can really achieve through the adoption of financial innovation in some of the trade deals that the UK government is working on at the moment is really important for us. And I think many of our businesses have yet to anticipate the significance of some of those deals. And certainly when we look at the great work that's been happening with the support of ourselves and other organizations like us in terms of promoting financial services globally through some of those deals with markets such as Australia, Singapore, and others, I think there's a real opportunity there for businesses based in the UK, wherever they are from, to take advantage of that. But also there's an important connectivity between the like-minded hubs. I keep coming back to this idea of, fintech businesses, in a way, whilst we can talk about trade deals, perhaps don't recognize borders as strongly, and will always look for the opportunities with like-minded people and like-minded places, wherever that may happen. And again, coming back to why I'm here today in Lithuania, is there's a real opportunity for UK and European fintechs to connect through places like London and Vilnius, through the UK and Lithuania, to make the most of like-minded cultures, particularly around innovation, taking shape. And I see that as a real important part of our mission in terms of supporting international connectivity as well. One final point that I want to sort of focus on is what we're doing to promote the UK over the next 6 months or so. And I talked about some of the work that we're doing at Innovate Finance to support initiatives in overseas markets, our US program, for example, our international scaling series, where we take a particular market and focus on it and encourage our UK-based members to look at the opportunities in those markets and to also encourage businesses from those markets to learn more about the UK. I've had some really exciting conversations here with both the Fintech Hub Lithuania, Fintech Lithuania, and of course Invest Lithuania as well, around potential support for such programs. So hopefully we'll be able to develop something there. Our US initiative, of course, looking at how we can better connect with the markets there, is something that's ongoing. And a key piece for us every year, and it's returning this year as well, is something we call IFGS, which is the Innovate Finance Global Summit, which takes place during UK FinTech Week, the first week of April 4th onwards. It's an opportunity for the entire community to come together, and this year, whether that's in the real world, but also this year in a hybrid virtual world as well. So we're looking forward to obviously bringing the community, bringing the international community back together in the UK as well, and focusing on some of the emerging trends and opportunities that are coming through in terms of both the global ecosystem and the UK fintech ecosystem too. So there's a lot, as I say, a lot happening there internationally. There's a lot to talk about in terms of the regulatory cooperation that we're seeing, a lot to talk about around the investment piece, and a lot to talk about fintech as a force for good, as a force for positive change as well. So I'm delighted to be here, and happy to take any questions and from you either after this or during. And thank you very much for your attention, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. We do have some questions here from the audience. Since we're running out of time, I'll take the most popular ones. So the first one is, what is the most growing fintech subsector in UK at the moment?
Alongside the more established subsectors, so I've mentioned the payment space, the SME financing space. I would say that RegTech is a hugely growing opportunity at the moment in the UK, but we're also seeing significant developments in InsurTech as well. There's a great and well-established insurance business here based in the UK historically. So it's no surprise, of course, that some of the learnings from sort of the banking side of fintech are now being picked up. So we're seeing huge growth there as well. But also in some of those more innovative areas of fintech, whether it's the connectivity to AI in terms of facilitating broader financial services, the development of digital currencies I've already touched on, but also the development of digital ID and the security implications for that. I mentioned Belfast briefly. There's a huge cyber hub there as well. And that connectivity between the cyber industry and the fintech industry, I can see that getting closer over the next couple of years. I see that as a trend in terms of this broader adoption of fintech and fintech products, and the need to keep those connections secure. I think is really important. So I can see that being an emerging trend as well.
Thank you.
Peter, have you been listening to our fireside chat carefully?
I have.
So there is a related question. Good. From what you've learned about Lithuanian fintech and its regulation so far, how would you say UK regulator compares to Lithuania, or not at all? I'm
conscious they're still in the room somewhere, so I'll be very careful. I think the UK regulator has rightly had has had the reputation for being quite open and for being competitive. But that sort of cultural diversity of opinion doesn't happen overnight. It's the likes of organisations such as our own supporting them on their own journey of learning of what innovation is and learning what works for a sector like fintech is really important. So if you're in a business right now and you're talking to Lithuanian regulators and you're perhaps a little frustrated with the pace of change, I would advocate be patient, be as informative and educationalist as you can, because I would say that the key learning from the FCA and their experience with the regulatory sandbox, and more recently the digital sandbox, has been that piece around being as open, as honest as possible, but recognize, of course, that regulator must regulate. So you can only have a thriving, mature sector if you allow that to happen. but it doesn't happen overnight, and there have been instances around, say, for example, SME financing. We had a big piece of work on that the last couple of years. Innovate Finance launched the 36 Age Group, which looked at a very specific piece of regulation impacting on that sector. And more recently around buy now, pay later, BNPL services. There's a journey that we go on as an industry body in talking to government and talking to regulators. Recognize, of course, there's a journey that they need to go on as well to understand how your products, how your services work. So be patient, be kind, be understanding, and I'll keep as diplomatic as I can on that one.
Okay. So it's a learning journey for everyone. We hear that. And you were showing on the slides here like quite a massive investment jump in 2021.
Yeah.
What would you say were the reasons for that?
I've heard that obviously a lot of investment was perhaps held back in 2020, although our investment figures perhaps, we saw increased investment in 2020 as well, an increase on 2019, which, before the pandemic we thought was a record year, and it sort of begins to pale into insignificance compared to 2021. I think that, again, that maturity of the sector, the recognition of the change that products and services are now making across wider financial services and around the wider economy. During the pandemic, for example, we saw UK fintechs really rise to the challenge of supporting businesses and their business users, ensuring that they were getting the growth capital, ensuring that they were getting any capital that they required to keep functioning during that time. And particularly in the earlier days of the pandemic and the first lockdown in the UK, it was a very difficult time for small businesses right across the UK economy, not just in finance. So I think there was a real... The sector really stepped up, businesses really stepped up, demonstrated the power of fintech and what it can do. And I think as a consequence of that, investors have stepped up and said, well, actually, here is a serious, maturing sector that we can invest in, that we can be a part of. And we've seen these jumps right around the world as well. I understand there's been a proportionate increase as well here in Lithuania around the investment sector. We're seeing it across the globe in other markets as well. But that jump in the UK, I think a recognition again of the global lead UK has taken.
Okay, so sounds like fintechs have not wasted a good crisis and really proved themselves.
Yeah, indeed.